Good morning and welcome back to the Twisting Roads. It's July the 23rd, day 30, and I'm here in Edinburgh. I'm actually staying on the campus of the University of Edinburgh in student dorms, which they lease out, I guess, during the summertime when students are away. It's very nice, actually. The campus is large, and to tell you the truth, it's one of the better stays I've been at for quite a while. Here is a view of the premises here. There's a desk, 2 single beds, and a private washroom. So in a few minutes I'm going to head out and join a guru walk tour of the city of Edinburgh for 2 hours, and we'll see more of Edinburgh. Stay with me. This octagonal building basically is the town crier. They would climb it up and basically announce any news out of London. It would take 3 days to get news from London to Edinburgh. And even more recently, when Queen Elizabeth died, they got the announcement and announced it through the town crier 3 days after the Sky News reported it. So this is the old Parliament buildings of Scotland, and it's independent from Britain or from England, and it was built in 1636. The Parliament has been relocated to a newer building, a much more modern building. This is a statue of King Charles II. King Charles I actually was executed for treason by Oliver Cromwell. And his son basically took over after an 11-year period of not having a monarchy. So outside the Cathedral of St. Giles here, apparently it was built by King David I in the 1100s. A woman by the name of Jenny Geddes basically created a riot in which started the War of the Three Kingdoms, because Charles I wanted to introduce a new prayer book to it, and Jenny Geddes threw a stool at the minister, and it created a riot. From there, it ended up with 14 years of war between the Royals, the Presbyterians, England, Scotland, and Ireland. This is a location where people spit, actually. More about that. Apparently, there used to be a prison there, and they used to have public executions as well. They decided to create some kind of silent protest, and they used to spit at the door of the prison. The prison was eventually torn down in the 1800s, but it ended up, people decided to spit on the location of the door anyways. So it was rather interesting that people carry on that tradition of spitting on the ground where I showed you, and they continue to do that today. It's not vulgar. Apparently the locals do it all the time. So right behind me is Deacon Brodie's Tavern, and William Brodie actually was an entrepreneur, an engineer, a locksmith, and he was quite wealthy actually, but there was a secret part of him. He was actually a philanderer. He had 2 mistresses and a wife and kids from the mistresses. He also, by day he was a respected citizen of Edinburgh, but by night he would go in and steal from people. He would rob their places. He did this because he was a locksmith, and whenever he was invited on site to change the locks, he would make a duplicate key. Once he did that, he had access to these buildings, but he'd wait a bit of time before entering the building and robbing the building. He also had a gang with him of 2 people, actually 3 people, and one day they tried to rob the Parliament buildings, and because he had a key, he was able to get in, but they were almost caught. Someone chased them out, and so the Scottish government offered a reward for any information leading to the arrest of those people who tried to rob the Parliament building. They one of the robbers basically came forward and had an immunity deal, and he was offered the reward of £100, which was quite a bit of money, and they named Brodie. And the police didn't think very much of it because they thought that he was a respected citizen, and how could a man that wealthy actually be part of a robbery plan. So they went to his house. By then, Brodie ended up fleeing from Edinburgh to London and Amsterdam, and the cops were basically closely behind. They found him in Amsterdam because he was writing his letters to the mistress, and so one of the king's lawyers basically went after them, brought him back, and they executed him in front of that square where they had public executions that I showed you. Robert Louis Stevenson actually wrote a book about him, and basically it was a short story, and it was based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So there goes the correlation between Brodie, respected citizen during the day, and robber at night. This is the Writers' Museum. It contains works of Robert Burns, Robert Louis Stevenson, and Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott basically gave Scotland this national identity. After the Jacobite uprising, the English basically outlawed the wearing of the kilt, the playing bagpipes, speaking the Gaelic. But later on in the 19th century, Sir Walter Scott started to write a book called Waverley, and it was based on the history of Scotland, and it gave Scotland back its national pride. The book became a bestseller, of course, and he went on to write books like Ivanhoe, Rob Roy, books that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Quite a young age, she was only 19. That meant she sadly lost her marital home here in the Old Town, and she moved about 20 miles south to a place called Kelso. She begins a new life down there, of course, tries to put the past behind her. She starts a relationship with the innkeeper's son where she's living. She falls pregnant by him. Now sadly there's no way to tell you this story without covering a pretty dark topic, and that was Maggie sadly lost her baby. Worst thing in the world that can happen to a person, of course. Worst was about to happen for Maggie because the circumstances around the loss of that child at quite a late stage made it at the time technically a criminal offence. It was a law that was called the Concealment of Pregnancy Act. Because the authorities thought she had hidden the fact she was pregnant and then lost the baby in what they deemed to be suspicious circumstances, it was a way to control women and their bodies back in the day. She was now going to go on trial for this crime. She was found guilty at trial and sentenced to death. So worst possible circumstances imaginable here. She was hanged over here. Her family took her body that direction to give her a proper send-off in her home village of Musselburgh. They are halfway along the road. They hear some noise coming from behind them. Open up the box that she's been put in to find out Maggie is still breathing. She's still very much alive. The authorities find out about this and bring her back to hang her once more. This is where it gets good. Because a local judge stepped in and said, wait a minute, you can't do that legally. She has a death certificate with her name on it, signed by a doctor. She's legally dead. You can't punish somebody for the same crime twice. That is a double jeopardy rule. So she goes on to live for another 40 years here in Edinburgh. Becomes a bit of a celebrity around town because she's cheated death. She remarries, has 3 children. She takes advantage of that celebrity by opening that pub there. Her name is on the front to take advantage of the celebrity status. Her name, however, is not on the licence because dead people can't get a licence from the council to sell alcohol. because they're dead. The other thing dead people can't do is pay tax. She never pays another penny of tax again in her life. She was known by the nickname Half-Hanged Maggie, because she's only half-hanged. She was very lucky, of course, but she's very lucky for when it happened, for the timing. This happened in 1724, 12 years before the Witchcraft Act was repealed. If this has happened even like 20 years earlier, she might have just been treated like a suspected witch and she would have been hanged again, probably. She's also responsible for a change in the wording of the death sentence. The death sentence used to read hanging from the neck. It got changed to hanging from the neck, comma, until you are dead. Because that's the loophole she took advantage. She was hanged, it just never worked. So I told you, nice happy ending. It came good in the end, but yeah, quite grim for a minute there. We're going to go to the graveyard to finish off.
One more story here. This is where they had the public hangings and where Maggie was hanged. But one of the last rites that people are entitled to is basically have a shot of whiskey before being hanged. And over here they have the last drop, meaning that basically that was the last drop of whiskey they had before being hanged publicly. There's a story about the Greyfriars Bobby. Apparently a policeman in mid-19th century he used to patrol the streets of Edinburgh, and he was lonely just doing this on his own, so he got a dog, Skye Terrier, to keep him company, and he accompanied him throughout his beat. So 2 years later, this policeman, he came down with tuberculosis and died, and apparently the Skye Terrier would visit his graves every day for about 13 years. He didn't have a dog license, but when people in Edinburgh find out that he was visiting the grave, they adopted him and they made him a citizen of Edinburgh. In fact, that gave him a right to vote even before women were allowed to vote. I remember the story some time ago when I visited Edinburgh with my brother in 1986. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the tour of Edinburgh as much as I did. Tomorrow, I'm off to Keswick, so stay with me and we'll see you down the road.